Okay. Oh, okay. We're actually false on the first one. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Absolutely, domestic violence is a leading cause of death for African American women. And then what percentage? Oh, so we're torn. Haha. Okay. So some studies have actually proven that 49% of women in the state of Oklahoma have experienced domestic violence. So that's roughly half, roughly half. So, okay. So domestic violence, what is it? So domestic violence is all about coercive control. Abusers use lots of different types of tactics to maintain that control. So it can include things like psychological abuse, sexual coercion, economic abuse, and then it can be punctuated by those violent and threatening acts. So what's important to note is that people often think domestic violence is only about physical abuse, but it's so much more than that. Isolation is a huge piece of that. So abusers will do things to drive wedges in between you and your families, or you and your friends. If you spend too much, maybe he'll say, and oftentimes it's not just you can't go to your family member's house, but things like, your mom only calls you when she wants something, or your sister only calls when she wants you to watch her kids. So why do you keep going over there and letting her make you watch her children? You have enough to worry about. Or if you spend more time with your friends, they don't love you as much as I do. I've been here for you through everything. And so why do you care more about them than you care about me? So maybe shaming you for spending time with other people. So doing things like that. They'll drive wedges in between relationships. So maybe lie on you to friends and family, things like that. And then that guilt is also a big portion of that. They also will use things like intimidation, financial abuse, all of those kinds of things to help maintain that control in the relationship. If you're interested in learning more about domestic violence, I'm just going to do a really brief overview today. If you're interested in learning more about domestic violence, Lundy Bancroft is a huge, amazing resource. He has made it his life work, working with perpetrators of domestic violence. And a lot of what we train with and teach with at the YWCA is information that has come from him. He's written some amazing books. He's also really active on social media, and you can find a lot of his lectures on YouTube and things like that. And so if you're interested in learning more about domestic violence, then Googling Lundy Bancroft. He'll give you a wealth of knowledge and information. So if you can go to the next slide, Priya. Okay, so domestic violence impact. One of the things I like to talk about is kind of why it's important, because so many people want to try to shove domestic violence under a rug or act like it doesn't exist, act like it doesn't impact us. But 1 in 4 women will be a victim of domestic violence. So chances are, even if you haven't been a victim yourself, you know someone who has been. Young women also experience the highest rates of intimate partner violence, and it's happening younger and younger. The youngest domestic violence homicide victim in Oklahoma was right around the age of 14 or 15. And so this is someone who was killed by her estranged boyfriend. And so dating violence happens. Like I said before, 49% of women have experienced intimate partner violence in the state of Oklahoma. And domestic violence is the leading cause of injury to women between the ages of 18 and 44. So moreover than car accidents, muggings, and rapes combined. So if you think about all the people that have car wrecks, all the people that have been robbed, all the sexual assaults, if you added that up, it still would not equate to the number of women who were assaulted by an intimate partner. So the most dangerous thing for women is men. By far, the most dangerous thing for young women is men. So that's why it's super important to think when you're swiping left or right on Tinder, when you're responding to those posts, because realistically, the most dangerous thing for women is men. So be careful as you swipe left or right. Okay, next slide. So some Oklahoma stats to make it real. The new numbers from the Violence Policy Center just came out. And we're actually number 15th in the nation for women killed by men in single offender, single victim homicides. That is the best number that I've ever seen. Most recently we were number 4, but it's important to note that number, we did not move to 15th because we're doing such a great job in the state of Oklahoma. We moved to number 15 because other states are doing worse. And so that's not a pat on the back number. It's we just kind of stayed with the status quo. Then, the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Board, this amazing board that really looks at pouring over thousands of pages of documents for every domestic violence homicide that takes place in the state of Oklahoma. They're overseen by the Attorney General's office, and they literally get medical records and police reports and counseling records and all of these different documents from child welfare. And they're able to pour over these things and figure out kind of where systems failed people. And then they make recommendations in December every year to the state about what we need to do. And the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Board has found that there were a little over 1,500 homicides related to domestic violence in the state of Oklahoma between 1998 and 2015. And just a little plug, shout out, shameless plug, the Fatality Review Board recently just started a task force specific to addressing the despairing rates of homicides in African American women, because Black women are killed more often than any other group because of domestic violence. And so we've named ourselves for Tia, which is in honor of Tia Bloomer, a victim of domestic violence who was killed in 2012 at the bus stop. And so I'll be spreading stuff on social media. We'll probably do some stuff in conjunction with Project Blackbird to help highlight that as well. So it is important to note that the state, the Attorney General's office, recognizes these disparities and sees the need for us to do some very targeted things in the African American community. And I am absolutely thankful to have a privilege to sit on that. Oklahoma is also first in the nation. So we're number 15th, yay, we moved a little bit, but we are first in the nation for lifetime prevalence of violence against women. So if you add up all of those different types of violence, domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking, we are number one for that. And that was put out by the Center for Disease Control. So. An estimated 29% of African American women are victimized by an intimate partner. And African American women experience domestic violence at higher rates than any other ethnic group. So at a rate 35% higher than white females and 2.5 times higher than any other ethnicity. We are a third of all the domestic violence homicides every year. So like I said, that Fatality Review Board task force is needed because we represent a third of all the domestic violence homicides. And it's huge to note that domestic violence is the leading cause of death for African American women between the ages of 15 and 34. So overwhelmingly so, we are dying because of domestic violence. And that's a huge problem. That's why we need to talk about it in our communities. That's why we need to talk about it with our daughters. That's why we need to talk about it in our church groups. That's why we need to talk about it with our friends, because it's a huge problem and we've got to address it. One of the taglines we often use is that domestic violence will only rise to a level that a community is willing to accept. And so if we're not willing to address it, if we're not willing to be fed up and say no more, then it will continue to happen. So it takes each and every one of us being committed to say this is not okay. So one of the things I also like to really talk about is, why does a victim stay? First and foremost, overwhelmingly victims leave. Overwhelmingly victims do eventually leave domestic violence relationships, but there are lots of reasons why it may take time. Leaving is not something that is immediate. It's something that we really, as advocates, as people safety planning with clients every day, it's a process. And we talk a lot about reasons why someone may stay in an unhealthy situation for a period of time. So one of the first things is fear. The most dangerous time for someone is when they leave. Of people that are killed, 75% of them are killed as they are leaving or right after they left. Because we talked about domestic violence being all about control. So if it's about control, as you leave, that abuser is losing control. So they'll do their last ditch effort. Fear of losing custody. It is extremely rare in the state of Oklahoma that a victim of domestic violence is given sole custody of her children. I've worked with hundreds of victims, and I can count on one hand the number of times that has happened. And so fear of losing custody to child welfare, or fear of having joint custody with an abuser. And I can't count the number of times a client has told me, you know, if I'm still here, then at least I can go in between. If we're getting joint custody and it's a week with him and a week with me and a week with him, then I have no clue as to what's happening to my children during that week while they're with him. And so, you know, it's not uncommon for a victim to stay long enough for us to start working a custody process, maybe with legal aid services or something like that. Fear of court involvement, because dealing with the court system is not fun. I hate going to court and I'm not the one on the docket. My willingness to help and serve my clients exceeds my distaste of the courthouse. But going to court is not fun and I'm not the one on the docket. Lack of resources, lack of social support. You've got to have people in your corner that will say, you can do this, that we will figure it out together. Lack of housing and finances, financial control. Abusers will have access to the money, even if she's the one working. Maybe the check is deposited into his account. And then leaving belongings. You know, like I got a lot of stuff, y'all. I don't know about y'all, but I got a lot of stuff. And it would be hard for me to leave all my very hard-earned things behind. That's really difficult. And then belief systems. So belief that the violence is temporary, that he will be what he told us he would be. Because abusers are great. Giving Oscar-worthy performances about, I'm so sorry, baby, I'll never do it again. I love you so much. And we want to believe that. We want to believe that they will be the person that they said they will be. And then culture plays a big part into it. So divorce, that people believe that divorce is wrong because we live in a Bible Belt. You know, there are, you know, definitely religious constraints about staying in the relationship. It can be difficult in terms of just coming to grips with the fact that it didn't work out the way we wanted it to. Sometimes that can be one of the hardest things, that we built this, you know, life and this white picket fence for ourselves and it didn't work out. That can be really difficult. And then also, you know, one of the things that I've seen particularly with African-American women is that we feel like if we address domestic violence in our own community, then we are just one more facet tearing down African-American men. And that we have, as a community, we need to work together to address larger systemic issues like racism. But if we're busy fighting the fight for violence against women, then how can we, in one breath, tear them down and say, no, this is not okay? And in the other breath, say, you know, we need to stand up against racism collectively as a group. One of the things that I think is essential to that is that you can't fight against systemic issues, against the group as a whole, if we're still disenfranchising part of our group. And so if we're ever going to be a collective group together to say things like systemic racism are not okay, things like discrimination are not okay, we can't then tear down half of our group by violence against women. So we have to be able to address these things so that we can collectively be strong together. And then some special considerations I think that are important in working with women of color in general. You know, I think it's huge to understand that people in the African-American community will be distrustful of systems because historically systems have failed them. So racism, things like failures of the criminal justice system, i.e. Tondalao Hall's case. You know, another thing to point out is that victims will often call law enforcement, and African-American women are more often arrested than their Caucasian counterparts when using violent resistance against their abusers. So the day that you say no more, I'm not going to let you hit me anymore, so you push him back and he has a bruise. Victims of domestic violence who are African-American are more often arrested in those instances than their Caucasian counterparts. And so that absolutely fosters distrust within the community. I think it's also really important to think about culture and how culture impact people's ways, the ways that people receive services, how they impact the access that they might be willing to go have. And then the culture of your system impact the victim. And so it's super important for us as service providers to be mindful of those things when we're providing services to clients, that we want our staff to be as culturally conscious and competent as they can possibly be, so that we're providing services in a way that people feel welcome. And so that's pretty much my portion. I think Tamika's going to take it away. We're going to talk a little bit more about trauma and children, do a poll, and then talk about trauma and children. So.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for attending the webinar. I'm sorry I had some technical difficulties there. My internet decided to stop right before my piece. So these are the questions that I do have for us. Number one, children of incarcerated parents suffer from mental illness at approximately the same rates as other children. Second question is, children of incarcerated, I think I lost it. There we go. Children of incarcerated parents are better at forming bonds with peers because it helps them to heal. Something like that. Well, I will definitely address both of these.
Hey, that's my fault. I got a little crazy.
No,
those polls.
no, my internet is tripping, so.
So I'll relaunch those polls towards the end of the webinar.
No worries, no worries. So, what I would like to do is kind of introduce myself and what I do. And I hope to utilize my clinical experience to help everyone understand kind of what's going on in this case, actually. So I will start by saying that I do feel that children of incarcerated parents are typically invisible victims. We talk about people kind of slipping between the cracks. This is that large group of kiddos. So I am licensed again to practice counseling for mental health, substance abuse, and co-occurring disorders. Also, I work as a school counselor. Early on in my experience, I worked with teenage girls. And a lot of times they would say, my mom is sick. I was clueless, didn't know what that meant. She's sick, she's sick. So finally, I learned sick was another word for she's typically on a substance that it disables her ability to parent. So that was that. Teenage girls had sick moms. Interesting. All right, so later on, I ended up working in an elementary school, which is one of the lowest performing schools in this state, actually, but I love my babies. And so that's when I learned vacation. And maybe some of you guys are already familiar with that, but I didn't grow up in a community where that was a norm. So I learned that when mom was on vacation, that meant that she was behind bars. So as I started piecing together these different experiences in my practice, I learned that young children have mothers who are on vacation. Then somehow mom gets off of vacation and she gets sick, which then, of course, renders her unable to be in that child's life. And so clinically, what we can call, what develops from that is an insecure attachment, right? So John Bowlby's work, if you guys are all into clinical stuff, talks about different styles of attachment. So when a caregiving person is not actually in the home or able to provide physical or emotional care to a child, they develop dysfunctional relationships. So people with insecure attachment are, the guys who love you with their fists. They're the girls who say, I just don't do girls. I don't do girls. So those types of relationships are significantly impaired when you do not learn to attach securely. So I just want to kind of review really quick here before we go into this video. It starts with man, that's horrible. Okay.
You better bounce back, Tamika.
Man, that's all right. We're gonna get through this. So it starts with detainment of a parent. That detainment can lead to depression in that parent. Later on, sometimes it leads to drug abuse, and all of these lend themselves to detachment, which makes it harder again to parent. So if we can go into the next slide, we do have, there we go. We have a video that I would like you guys to watch of the children of Tondalao Hall.
Priya, you probably have to unmute so they can hear it.
Stay strong. I mean, like, sometimes you don't feel like going through it, but then you're really going through it. So you just gotta stay strong and wait for them to come home. They don't come home.
Taylor Swift. All right. So I know you guys may not have been able to hear it all that well, but I will echo some of the statements that the young people made. But I want to say, I saw this video. Can y'all hear me? I saw this video for the first time about 2 weeks ago. This is when I was invited to work on this. And while I was watching it, I honestly became paralyzed with both sorrow and excitement because I realized that I knew these kids. And so, I've kind of heard offhand about the case, but I saw these names and I said, these charts are in my practice. I didn't see them, I didn't treat them myself, but I've staffed these cases. So I was actually beyond ecstatic that their guardian allowed me to present some clinical information that further illustrates the points that I'm going to make today. So there's levels to this. know that when a child's parent is locked up, it hits them on several levels: psychological, family issues, social issues, and also education issues. So what you're going to see on your left-hand side is what the research says. This is what all the journals and all that wonderful conglomerate of data says. And on the right-hand side, what you're going to see is actual excerpts from her treatment plan. This is from Ukiah Hall, the daughter that you saw in the image. This is what it says in her treatment plan. So whereas research says that kids will be, they will grieve and they will develop some things that look like psychopathology, I want you to know that in her treatment plan is very clear. Her biological father provides no emotional support or financial support for her or her two siblings and has minimal communication, which even more lends itself into the family problems, because of course we know that when a parent is unable to be in the home due to incarceration, it causes stress on everyone who's left in the home. Found a really cool stat that I was unaware of. I see it in my practice, but I didn't know it was a stat, that approximately 100,000 children in the foster care system are there because of maternal incarceration. It's even estimated that between the years of 1985 and 2000, 1/3 of the kids in the foster care system are there due to maternal incarceration. And in this case, I like to highlight, as in many other cases, that she couldn't just leave them with dad. Dad was the problem here. So this means that aunt, cousin, sister, friend is raising these kids, which is a strain on families. So again, as I mentioned earlier, some of the social issues here are that insecure attachment. A lot of times young people whose parents are incarcerated are stigmatized, they're embarrassed. And so working in a school setting, you see this. You see the kids who shy away from certain conversations, or they get jealous of other kids because their mom is coming to visit and coming to volunteer. And so what we think is a bully is really a child who's a little upset because his mom ain't around, because she didn't have a choice because of incarceration. So I just want us to kind of pay attention to those things. Another quote I see here is, she struggles to initiate and maintain long-term positive friendships at school. So there again is that insecure attachment. Later on, her clinician stated that the client's role, her school role and grades are inconsistent despite her having high academic potential. So again, we see a young Black girl underperforming in school because of psychological issues that are caused by something that she didn't have anything to do with, and by her mother being criminalized. And that's pretty sick. So again, going back to the education piece, we do see that school-related well-being, increased misbehavior, so on and so forth, goes on with kids who have incarcerated parents. And again, I hope that this slide helps to show you how the research says it, and then it's right here in our faces. I will say that each of the kiddos have been in therapy and continuing therapy. They're not with my practice anymore, but they are getting better. So this was from their initial treatment plan. Several down the road, they actually have improved, and kind of shout out to the good therapy. So I'm ready for the next slide. Thank you. This again is just a visual representation of what this looks like. So for young people whose parents are incarcerated, they are 48% more likely than children whose parents are at home to develop ADHD, 43% more likely to develop behavioral problems, depression, marijuana use. There's also some medical issues that are aligned with this as well. We'll address that on the next slide. So I just want you to kind of hear what's going on, because what the young man said in the video was, the message to kids is to stay strong. If you feel like you're going through it, you're really going through it. Keep hoping that they'll come home. And so that hope sometimes turns into depression, because you're hoping for something, you're hoping for this system to correct an issue that it chooses not to correct. And so I just want us to kind of take a moment to look at these statistics and some of these things that are quite common in a psychotherapy practice to see and understand how much can stem from a parent who's been locked away. So another statement that Jeffrey, the young man, made that hit me really hard was, I don't know. At the end of that, he said, keep wishing they're home, keep hoping they'll come home. And if they don't, I don't know. And that really stuck with me, right? I don't know, that uncertainty, because I see that hopelessness in so many young people's eyes, so many future scientists and engineers who are suspended by their psychological trauma. So at the bottom here, I kind of have some points, which are, I don't know, right? I don't know how I'll cope. I don't really know what I believe about the justice system. I don't know why I became a victim of unfair sentencing. So what's very true and has been stated by the Economic Policy Institute is that when children witness their parents' disenfranchisement, it erodes their engagement in the democratic process and social institutions. Further, they are less likely to perceive government institutions as just, trustworthy, or deserving of their participation. And my question is, why should they? That's all I got there. And so again, I want to take a look again at the achievement gap. So I kind of addressed the psychological issues, I addressed some of the sociological issues that go on, even some of the civic issues that go on, right? And let's now look at the achievement gap, which is a term we're kind of pretty familiar with in the education world. And so scholars who are looking at this now, looking at incarceration, are saying, hey, you know, if you're an educator and you got an issue with the achievement gap, you might want to get on board for dealing with this mass incarceration situation. So best visual I could kind of come up with. I just really do believe that it does enhance the school to prison pipeline. A lot of times these young people see incarceration
We may be having some technical difficulties right now. We're going to try to get Tamika back online. Thank you for your patience. How are y'all feeling so far right now? Feeling fired up?
Angry.
Very much so.
Angry.
Jaded.
Absolutely.
Some of the comments that are coming in, this is some eye-opening information.
All right, I'm back.
It's worth the wait.
Yay!
Yay, we have Tamika back online.
Sorry, I really don't know where we lost me, so I'll try to kind of go back a little bit. We talked about the I don't knows, right? Hopefully.
Yeah, so you were on school to prison pipeline. I think you were just going into the education.
Okay, so my slides are kind of self-explanatory. I can't see them right now for some reason, but it's all good because I got them open on my other computer. Young people whose parents are incarcerated tend to develop learning disabilities at higher rates. They misbehave in school, whatever that means. That's a whole nother webinar right there. But what I also want us to look at is the medical implications, right? So they're suffering from migraines, they're suffering from asthma, high cholesterol, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, which I hope we by now are no longer just reserving for military personnel and understand that trauma is in a lot of settings, and also homelessness. But with all of these that are here, understand that again impacts the child's ability to function in school. So what do we see at the end of the day? A lot of kids dropping out of school. So I've kind of juxtaposed that to this beautiful graphic of how much money we're spending on corrections versus the change in spending in education. So I just kind of thought that'd be neat to look at and think about as we're having this conversation about mass incarceration and its effect on children. So I will just kind of recap and summarize. I know I talked really fast. My main point that I want to bring home here, and I'm gonna read it real slow because I typed it pretty. When parents take involuntary extended vacations, upon returning home, many develop mental or addictive illnesses. This renders them unavailable to bond and also to parent. Their children have increased chances of developing pathological symptoms. They become disconnected, presenting even greater stress on the entire family system. They withdraw from life, and without adequate treatment, these children are at high risk of becoming victims of the pipeline to prison. Thank you.
So I just want to quickly talk about services that are available for victims of domestic violence, since we've talked about that today. There are confidential services that are available for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. The YWCA operates 5 hotlines. The 2 emergency hotlines, so domestic 24 hours that are domestic violence hotline, that's 405-917-9922. And then also our 24-hour emergency sexual assault hotline. So if anyone has been sexually assaulted and either wants services or is interested in a sexual assault exam, then they can get that if they call 405-943-7273. And then briefly want to talk about Palomar, Oklahoma City's first family justice center. So the Family Justice Center is an initiative that was created to provide services for victims in one place. So instead of clients having to go to 20 different locations to get the help that they need, they can actually come to one central location and meet with an advocate from the YWCA, talk to a law enforcement detective to determine if they want to file a police report or not. They can meet with a legal aid attorney in one place. They can receive some medical services. We have the City County Health Department coming in a couple of days a month to do medical services. We also have childcare available on site. There's a model classroom, which is gorgeous. And so we teach groups there. Clients are able to get counseling services there, legal help, and talk to law enforcement all in one place. And so that's an amazing resource for victims. And so they can access Palomar by calling the 552-1010 number. So there are definitely confidential services available for victims who need help.
Okay, so I did kind of leave something out there, and I'm glad that was brought up, the services for victims. So, I don't want to leave this sounding so blight about everything, because I do believe in therapy and I believe treatment. And so a lot of the work that I do, and somewhere in this you'll see my contact information, is doing that reattaching. So when mothers do return home, I help them to kind of have these conversations with their children. They get to say, I'm sorry I was gone, I missed you too. But now we're going to get back to business, because what happens so often with these teenagers is they didn't have that conversation, right? So they go into this place of thinking, well, I can just do whatever I want. I'm mad, I'm angry, I'm grieving. And so then they lose their children. And a lot of the parents, typically mothers, feel so guilty about being gone that they just kind of let them do whatever. And so I love what I do, because I get to play that kind of go between and helping to reattach. So there is hope. Seek counseling, please. If it ain't me, seek it somewhere. All right, I'm out.
So here are some important dates to think about as far as the advocacy for Tondalao Hall and ways that you can get involved with Project Blackbird, or actually anyone who's participating as a panelist. And also I just want to shout out, where'd she go? Gwendolyn Fields and All in One Project as well, who has a federal lawsuit against the Department of Corrections right now in the state of Oklahoma. So definitely check out All in One. But letter writing events coming up all across Oklahoma City and the metro area. We're putting events together to write letters to District Attorney David Prater. And essentially, and he's the District Attorney of Oklahoma County, and essentially what we're asking him to do is nothing. Just stay out of the way. The ACLU filed a habeas corpus petition within the district courts in Shawnee, Oklahoma, for Tondalao's release. And we're just asking to allow that petition to take its path, allow the process to happen, stay out the way. Or, send an email and say, let her out. I actually care about what's going on in this state. She represents all the problems that are wrong with incarceration in Oklahoma. Let her out. So November 1st, we have 29 events right now that are happening all over Oklahoma City, Norman, Edmond, where people are getting together and writing letters to District Attorney David Prater. And we will pick those letters up by November 4th, and we'll just start slamming them out. If you want to host an event, Sydney in the chat is posting a link so that you can put your information in, tell us what your needs are, also get an idea of what the expectations look like, and host an event. It's a good way to get involved. It's a good way to keep the conversation going, because you'll be around people who obviously are ready to do something. We will have an event called Tabernacle, which I like to call a high frequency healing justice space. Tabernacle, we did one last year where Athea Walking Tree came down, who is a Jamaican drummer, and she is absolutely amazing. And she came down with her mobile drum unit, and we did collective artwork, we danced, we did mantras, we connected, we ate vibrant food, and we acknowledge and understood what community means as far as healing, what community means as far as how our presence intertwines and our intersections of stories, etc. And we had to get back down to where it is. We had to get back down to the roots. So at Tabernacle, we'll also be talking about some of the other upcoming work with Project Blackbird, still unpacking incarceration in Oklahoma. That location will be given out within the next couple of days. So be on the lookout for this. All of this information will be sent out via email for everybody who's registered to the webinar. We also plan on doing a bailout of the Oklahoma County Jail, bailing one person out by November 20th. If you know somebody who is behind bars right now, and the only reason they're behind bars is that they can't afford to pay their way out, because since 80% of people behind bars haven't been convicted of any crime, they also may have not even seen a judge at this point. And so we're getting people from behind bars who are not any threat to society. They are the ones who rely on freedom, and they rely on their freedom to just, live their lives, to pay bills, to get in their cars. And they don't happen to have, like I said, $1,000 sitting in a bank account because they got locked up. And if they do have $1,000 sitting in the bank account, they can't access it because their wallet is in police confiscation. So we're bailing somebody out on November 20th or by November 20th. If you know anyone, please share that link around, and we'll be looking at all the requests. And bail, you get out, everybody gets out. We got to redefine who is a criminal. That's part of the problem, is that we're criminalizing people before they even see a judge. And unfortunately, bail bondsmen are complicit in doing that because they're taking money and collateral from people who have not been charged with any crime, who just want freedom, who just want to get out, who just couldn't pay the tag. Also, November 21st, Tondalao's first hearing date is in Shawnee. We'll be mobilizing to Shawnee. We just want to make sure everything goes smoothly. If you want to know more information about that mobilization, please feel free to join us. Also, get involved. We have a petition. On change.org. Sydney will post a link to that petition. You can write a letter yourself. You don't have to host a letter writing event to do that. We will be happy to share the addresses and who to make those letters out to. You just doesn't have to be District Attorney David Prater. You can also write a support letter to Tondalao. And Tondalao loves letters. She is in a poetry class at Mabel Bassett called Poetic Justice. Poetic Justice is an organization that was founded by Ellen Stackable, and they go into women's prisons and teach them to write poetry. And some of the poetry that they publish will blow your mind. And Tondalao's is in the advanced class right now. So hopefully you'll write a letter to Tondalao. She'll send you back poetry. Also, donate. We want to keep our efforts going. We want to keep this work consistent. There's a huge spotlight on Oklahoma right now. We want to make sure that this information is getting to who it needs to get to. And we are activating, engaging, and educating the community in the best way to move forward and really bring about some real change. You can consider volunteering, interning. We have so many things that need to be done. This would not be happening if it wasn't for the amazing panelists we have and the amazing people who are working behind the scenes. Shout out Sydney, Katasha, and Shalandra, who are handling our live, our chat, and also just keeping us on time. If you want to get involved with digital media advocacy, maybe you got something to teach us, hey, we open to it. Also, share your story and keep the conversation going. That's one of the best ways to get involved. And we have to dismantle this cone of silence that we have on this stuff, man. We all have our things. We're all going through it in our ways. But in our darkness, we have to embrace. And in our light, we have to embrace, but we share regardless. We have to share regardless, exchange those energies, and don't carry that weight along. All right, next slide.
All right, we have a Q&A.
Do you guys want us to each type in maybe our contact information into the chat box because people asked for that? We can do that because I don't think we have a slide with it. So.
And also, if you have any questions right now, I think there may be some here. I'll drive the YWCA van. Come on, Angela. And so I saw a question is who is representing Tondalao in the parole hearing? Most likely it will be the ACLU. The ACLU is covering all the litigation thus far. So I feel pretty confident most likely it'll be the ACLU. Mariana, good question. Good question. You know, I was not able to find national or state data with demographics for folks who are charged with failure to protect. Only thing I was able to find was that when they were charged, they were usually women, or they were always women. At that point, they hadn't found a case with a man on a national scale. I'm pretty sure the data gets much more intricate looking at it on a state or city level. So any insight you have to that, please share. Yeah, we can definitely use that. Great question. Great question.
I think we have another question that's asking why is David Prater being targeted if her case is in Shawnee?
So David Prater can actually stop everything. He could challenge the hearing, and the hearing will not move forward at all. David Prater is also very much aware of this case in a lot of ways. And so what we're asking for David Prater, because the other part is this case has already failed in appeal. It has already failed in clemency hearing. And so this is possibly what feels like the last shot we have this next three months. So we have a district hearing date, we have in front of the Pardon and Parole Board, and then a potential clemency hearing. All of those David Prater has power within. And so what we're essentially doing is trying to get him to stop, just to get out the way and not challenge it, not spend time challenging the constitutionality. Or the the petition that ACLU has filed. So yeah, he could stop everything.
Okay, so we have one here and it's asking, is the ACLU challenging the constitutionality of the failure to protect statute in general or just in Tondalao Hall's case in particular?
Good question. Good question. So the ACLU is challenging the Eighth Amendment of the Constitution, cruel and unusual punishment. So, and in that, they're challenging the disproportionate sentencing, the unfair sentencing, the fact that Tondalao got 30 years and the actual abuser, walked away with 8 years probation. And so that's what's being challenged. So the thing is, we're not asking for Tondalao to get released without any consequences whatsoever. She's already served 13 years behind bars. She's missed the most pivotal moments of childhood development that she will never be able to get back. 13 years behind bars for the crime she didn't commit is enough. So what we're asking for is, hey, this is enough. Let her go. Let her free. She's not a threat to society. She was never a threat to society. And we really have to challenge how we define who criminals are in Oklahoma and who's not.
Follow up from before, is he doing this behind the scenes? Prater doesn't have jurisdiction unless she was convicted in OK County. That's what the question says.
Another good question, Gwen. Hey, this is what I know. I know that Prater is able to at least challenge the petition. And so he can do whatever he's doing stuff behind the scenes. I wouldn't put it past any be doing stuff behind the scenes. But yeah, Prater still can absolutely challenge this. He hasn't made a statement yet as to what, because we filed the habeas corpus back in June, I believe, in June. And so there has been no statement from Prater yet. And ideally, that's how we want to keep it. That's how we want to keep it. So I tell you what, for any other questions, we will be sure to get to those. No, really. Okay, Gwendolyn is also a litigator with All in One. So Gwendolyn knows the scoop. And so I'll look forward to talking to you after the webinar. And any other questions, please feel free to post them. And if we can get to them, surely we will, even if we have to get to them in email. So stay connected. So we've all posted our email addresses in the chat. Also, there are you can follow us on social media, Project Blackbird, OKC, Twitter. Also, feel free to email us. Check out Free Tondalao Hall for updates. We're seeking bloggers. Anybody that wants to blog for Free Tondalao Hall, please feel free to send us a message. And of course, like I said, also just be sure to check the chat for contact information for the rest of the panelists.
So in closing, I would like to thank everyone for attending the webinar. This was an amazing experience. I also want to give a shout out and huge thank you to Valerie Vaughn for the images used in today's presentation. These images were shot in downtown OKC at the Myriad Botanical Gardens as part of a healing justice demonstration. And I want to say thank you to our amazing panelists and hosts, as well as all of you for tuning in. We hope that you become engaged and involved with us. And one last thought I want to leave you with is love is or it ain't. Then love ain't love at all by Toni Morrison. So I hope you keep that in mind as we move forward. And if you have any questions, please connect with us. We're more than happy to connect with you as well as any needs you may have. So thank you for attending and have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.